Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Emor. It contains quite a number of instruction with regard to the various Jewish holidays across the year. And there's one that I find particularly relevant to the time that we are now involved in. In chapter 23, verse 19. Verse 9, And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you are come to the land which I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring an omer. An omer is a certain measurement. An omer of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the omer before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And you shall offer that day when you wave the omer, etc. Goes on to talk about the particular sacrifice. And then in verse 15, and you shall count for yourselves from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the omer of the wave offering, 7 complete Sabbaths shall there be. To the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new meal offering to the Lord. This is a commandment that we refer to in Hebrew as Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. And it begins on Passover, and it is a requirement to count 7 full weeks. When it says 7 Sabbaths, it's referring to a week, a full week of time, 7 weeks. And after 7 weeks, on the 50th day, there is another festival, and we then have the festival of first fruits. So we have the wave offering on Passover, 7 weeks, and then the festival of first fruits. Now, it's very interesting, the wording that is used here, as I mentioned, the word Sabbath refers to a period of time that means a week. There's also a term here that says, on the morrow of the Sabbath. And actually, during the Second Temple period, there was a debate within the Jewish community. What does this mean? Do we start counting this 50-week period? Do we start counting from the day after the Sabbath, the first Sabbath that is in the Passover holiday? Or does the word Sabbath there refer to the holiday itself? The first day of the Passover holiday has the characteristics of a Sabbath. Holidays for us are very similar to Sabbath, almost identical in fact in terms of what you do and don't do and prayers, etc. This was a debate between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees said they took this very literally and said it needs to be counted from the day after the first Sabbath, whereas the Pharisees said, no, this is not what God had in mind. Indeed, our oral tradition back from Moses' time already tells us that we're supposed to count immediately following the first day of Passover. And indeed, the Pharisee tradition is the one that won out, and I believe throughout the Second Temple period, for most of the time, the actual practice in the Second Temple was also to follow the Pharisee interpretation. And indeed, that's what we do today. The night immediately after the first day of Passover, we begin counting every single day. How many days is it of the Omer? Now, what is this holiday at the end of the 50 days, or on the 50th day, after 7 weeks of counting? Well, in this part of the Bible, we know that it is the Feast of the First Fruits. However, we also know from calculations of time in other parts of the Bible that it is the exact same day, which is the 6th of Sivan, when the 10 Commandments were given. Therefore, what we are doing is we are not only counting, as it is presented here, an agricultural count between one sort of harvest and a second kind of harvest, but we are actually counting from the redemption of Passover, that first day, the 14th of Nisan. Actually, we start counting the next day. We start counting actually on the night of the 16th of Nisan, when the children of Israel have just been taken out of Egypt, and we count from there until the giving of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. Now, this idea of counting is something we see in many places in the Bible. And indeed, at the beginning of Numbers, God commands to Moses to in fact, this is why it is called Numbers. God commands Moses in the Sinai desert to organize a count and organize a census. God says, and this is in chapter 1, take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families, by the houses of their fathers, by the number of names, etc. A full count, a full census is needed to be taken. And in fact, this is not the first census. There are other censuses that are taken even just in the book of Numbers. Why? And a very classic commentary on this issue brings a wonderful little story and says, in the same way that a person who has accumulated precious stones or coins, and they're very important to him, they're very precious to him, he's so excited about them, he wants to count. A rich man, for example, loves to count his money. A person with many jewels loves to count their jewels. And it's a way of expressing love and excitement about what it is you have. In the same way, God loves to count the Jewish people because it is an expression of His love. God knows how many people are there. He doesn't need the count. And I think this commentary is very, very beautiful because clearly the count is also a very practical measure that Moses and the leadership needs to know who's who, what's what, and where everybody is. And this is what we do each year, ever since, and what I'm doing right now, counting every single evening until we arrive at Shavuot, at the holiday of Pentecost, the holiday of weeks, the holiday of first fruits. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.